All right, y'all, you're Locked On Falcons. I'm your host, Aaron Freeman. Today we'll be joined by Kevin Knight of the Falcoholic. We'll be talking about the key ingredients to the Falcons' secret sauce, why this style of offense, as the Falcons are showing, may be sustainable for the foreseeable future, and whether or not Mariota's play on Sunday finally puts the Desmond Ridder conversation to bed.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman, the very humble host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family. And today's episode of Locked On Falcons is brought to you by Bird Dogs, the most comfortable shorts, pants, and sweatpants with built-in liners. Just go to birddogs.com, use the promo code Locked On, and boom, a free Bird Dogs rope hat will come with your pair of Bird Dogs. So, guys, as we begin today's episode, we thank you for making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. Of course, Locked On Falcons is free and available Monday through Friday on a variety of podcast platforms, including Apple, Odyssey, Google, Spotify, and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Falcons on YouTube, and you will get the video version of the podcast the night before the audio drops. And that's only if you leave us a like, you leave a comment, you hit that bell, all that stuff and more. But guys, we'll be joined a little bit later on today's episode, or a little bit later, like in the next, 30 seconds, by Kevin Knight of the Falcoholic. We'll be talking all about, Marcus Mariota's improved play and how that puts the Desmond Ridder conversation to the bed. We'll pick Kevin's brain on what sort of is the key ingredients to this Falcons secret sauce or secret formula for success, and whether or not that's sustainable for this football team for the foreseeable future heading into this year, and potentially putting this team on a path to being a playoff team. Crazy thing to think about it. But without further ado, let's jump into that conversation here with Kevin Knight of the Falcoholic right now. All right, y'all, you're Locked On Falcons, and I am joined by another illustrious guest, none other than Kevin Knight. You can hear him 4 days a week on the Falcoholic podcast. I wonder where he got that idea to do multiple shows. And you can also check him out, Falcoholic Live, as well as a written contributor over at the Falcoholic, a great website. But Kevin, welcome to the show, and we'll sort of jump into what we think the Falcons' key to success is so far this season, now that they've gotten to 3-3. I know on yesterday's episode, I expressed their improvement in the trenches, but I imagine a lot of it has to do with the fact that they had red helmets yesterday. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's either that or getting to 35 carries, because as we all know, as soon as you hit 35 carries, the game ends and you've won. So, that certainly was a big part of it, I'm sure. But they are, I believe, according to our uniform research expert, Evan Birchfield, the Falcons, I believe, are 8-1 when wearing the red helmets since they brought them back in 2007 for a game or two here and there. So, clearly, the Falcons just need to break these helmets out for crucial moments every season. And I think this may have, if you're of the mind that this team, I believe Greg Rosenthal of the Around the NFL podcast has officially graduated the Falcons from frisky to spicy. So if you're of the mind that this team is potentially spicy for the playoffs, then this was a absolutely vital win to get to keep them on track for that possible goal. So this good game to break the helmets out for.
Yeah, definitely. And on a more serious note, though, what do you think is the key to why this team looks so much better this year than they did a year ago in the year one of Arthur Smith?
It seems like the whole team is more shaped around what Arthur Smith wants. Like, I think he got more comfortable with what he wanted to do. He's calling the offense more like he wants to call it. As much as I love Matt Ryan and really don't think he was a problem with this team, it's clear that he was not necessarily the quarterback that fits this scheme the way that Arthur Smith wanted to run it, and the offensive line being an absolute disaster was certainly not helping anything. But molding the offense into what it is now, I also don't know that this is the final form of this offense, considering how heavily they've invested in pass catchers. You think that if you're going to spend back-to-back first-round picks on receiving game pieces like Kyle Pitts and Drake London, that you're not planning to throw the ball 14 times a game in perpetuity. So I think this is just Arthur Smith being a smart coach. They want to win games. Like, I know we're all in this sphere focused on, offseason talk and planning, and like, would it be better for this team to, finish with a bad record and just get a high draft pick and all this? But they're not going to do that. Coaches that finish with poor records tend to get fired. So they're going to try. Yeah, I know, it's crazy, right? If they would just win more games, they wouldn't get. Yeah, man, it's crazy, right? Yeah. If you just win more games, you get to keep your job. I know how crazy that is for Matt Rule and company over there in Carolina, but I think this is an offense that Arthur Smith has crafted to win games this year. We've talked about, of course, the fact that the Falcons are dealing with, almost $80 million in dead cap. So they're sort of putting together a roster with a lot of draft picks and cheap veterans. And they had to neglect some areas of this team. The offensive line, despite being very good at run blocking, I think is still not a good pass blocking unit. You can see with the sack numbers, like, they don't pass very often, and Mariota still gets sacked a lot. So this is not a particularly good pass blocking offensive line, but they're able to get it done and win this way because of how well everything's come together with the run game and how efficient the passing game has been with limited opportunities. And of course, the defense not being a raging dumpster fire helps things a lot. They've definitely graduated to being, I think we talked about in the offseason, like, they need to be more around 20 and not 30 for this team to be, frisky potentially for the playoffs. And I think at this point, they are closer to 20, certainly, in how they've played on the field than like worse in the league. And if you can run the ball as successfully as they have, which is, third in the NFL in most rushing yards, and they are officially the most run heavy scheme, you can win by getting a takeaway or two and just pounding the rock and suffocating your opponents. And that's what they've done this year in most of these wins. And I think that's what Arthur Smith wants to do right now. Is it a long-term thing? That's a bigger question mark, because it's not going to work against teams that can put up points on you. They haven't really been tested. I mean, they have, but it hasn't, necessarily resulted in a lot of wins. Like the Rams, they got behind big. They did claw their way back, but they didn't win that game. And then, of course, they were robbed against the Bucs. So, it's complicated, but I do think that it's basically Arthur Smith sort of getting into a rhythm, getting more of the pieces he wants, and crafting an offense that's closer to what he is hoping to do, or that fits his strengths. Like him calling this drop back passing game with a really bad offensive line like last year, that's just not really his game. Him running a run heavy, very low volume passing attack where you just smash your opponent to dust with the run game, that really fits his strengths a lot better as a coach. And I think that's why we're seeing more success, even though this team isn't blowing anyone up in terms of yardage or passing attempts.
There you go. So yeah, on that note, we'll talk a little bit more about the sustainability of this very run heavy attack long term. Probably not over multiple years, but over multiple games this season. But that will allow us to talk a little bit more about the quarterback situation and Mariota's strong play as of late, and if that's going to potentially derail the Desmond Ridder science, as it's often termed, and his potential to come in and salvage this passing game, as so many people, not myself, of course, have hyped him to be able to do this season. We'll get into that here with Kevin Knight of the Falcoholic coming up on today's Locked On Falcons. So, guys, I want to tell you a little bit about Bird Dogs, who provide super comfortable pants, shorts, and now sweatpants. I have a pair of sweats and shorts myself, And I think the thing that makes Bird Dogs so great is they have these built-in liners, so everything is kind of nice and snug and cozy, if you get what I'm drift. And that's sort of what's on the inside of Bird Dogs, but on the outside they have great designs that you can be comfortable wearing for really any occasion. They have khaki designs if you want to be comfortable at the office, if you just want, pants and shorts and sweats that you can just lounge around the house in, if you want to head to the gym, you want to go to the beach, or you're just like me and you just want to be comfortable while you're sitting around all day grinding film and podcasting. They got whatever you need this season, and you can get that by going to birddogs.com and use the promo code locked on, and they'll throw in a free Bird Dogs rope hat. That's birddogs.com, birddogs.com, and use that promo code locked on, and boom, a free Bird Dogs rope hat will come with your pair of Bird Dogs, the most comfortable shorts, pants, and sweatpants with built-in liners. You will not take these things off, I promise you. Guys, I want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs, who are here to make it easier for you to find the right people that you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach the world's largest professional network of over 800 million people. LinkedIn Jobs helps you spread the word that you're hiring and gives you the simple tools like screening questions that's going to make it easy for you to focus on the right candidates with just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you want to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Just post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So I am here with Kevin Knight of the Falcoholic, and we're talking about the sustainability of this Falcons formula for success on offense, and we'll get into the conversation about the quarterback situation. But each and every day, guys, you can get into the conversation with Locked On NFL, covering not only these frisky or spicy Atlanta Falcons, but also the other 31 NFL teams around the league. So check out Locked On NFL, on Odyssey, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. So, Kevin, you already kind of mentioned that you don't necessarily feel like, a 40-14 offensive formula in terms of the ratio of run to pass is probably going to work against every team. But it does feel like, at least when you look at the rest of the Falcons schedule, which is crazy to say because we were looking at the schedule for most of the spring and summer being like, ooh, this is going to be tough. But, certain teams have not quite lived up to expectations so far this year. Obviously, we still got a lot of football left to be played, so things can change in that regard. But you're looking at the schedule and you're saying, like, or at least I am, I'm looking at it and thinking, well, this formula might be able to work pretty well against, some of these teams, especially over the next like 6 or 7 games before the bye. And I'm curious, do you feel like Mariota is kind of coming into his own and can potentially expand what we're doing currently with this offense, or are we kind of seeing the best of Marcus Mariota in this variation of the offense?
It's hard to say. The passing game has been very inconsistent when they've tried to air it out more, and you certainly don't bury Mariota for some poor games because he's shown that he can have good games too. I think that the deep passing game is never something that's going to be at a super high level with Mariota. He just doesn't seem to really have the touch on those deep passes to hit them consistently, but can he hit them consistently enough for that to be a much more potent part of the offense? Potentially. But I don't think he was brought in here to be a high volume passer. I think he was brought in here to be an efficient passer that's going to make the right decisions. And he stopped turning the ball over the past couple of weeks. So that's helpful. But, I don't know that the final form of this offense will ever involve Marcus Mariota, but it's only week 6. He is, in his first year back in this scheme after being a backup for years. Like, there is certainly a chance that he does evolve and continue to grow, and that this passing offense does take off at some point. Like, they do start landing these deep shots. They are able to unlock the offense. If that doesn't happen, then we'll probably see Desmond Ridder sooner than later. But if they're winning, also there's no pressure to put Ridder in. We could see this become more of a Alex Smith, Mahomes situation. Like if they're winning and they're in position for the playoffs, maybe we don't see Ridder till the end of the year, or maybe we see Ridder late. But I think it really comes down to when the coaching staff thinks that Ridder is the better quarterback, then he'll play. And we're never going to know when that is. They'll never say, they'll never reveal anything to us. And will it happen, in a favorable matchup or whatever? Who knows? But I think that this staff is very deliberate about these things. And I think as long as Mariota is keeping you in games and not costing you games and that sort of thing, they're not going to force Ridder out there at any point. So I don't know when it could be. I mean, I think every game like this one that Mariota has a very good game, is efficient and accurate, and is just everything's firing on all cylinders, and the offense is dominating their opponent, even a really good defense like the 49ers, despite them being quite injured. But every game of this is going to, quiet down the calls for Ridder from some, not all, obviously. Some people will continue to call for Ridder no matter what. But when Mariota falters, which I think we've seen, like this is probably going to be inconsistent, then the calls will continue. I don't know what the timeline is. I don't know how close Ridder was to being like in a place where the coaching staff was comfortable with him playing and starting. But I think when that happens, and I do believe it will be at some point this year, I just don't know when, then he'll play. But it's a good thing if Mariota, it's a good thing if Ridder's put in because the coaching staff's like, oh yeah, we're, 7-4 and we're putting in Desmond Ridder now because we think he's just the better quarterback option, and not because Marcus Mariota is a dumpster fire and we need to make a change. Because then you should have complete confidence in Ridder coming in and playing, because they're like, oh, Mariota's not bad. This team has a winning record, and they're still moving to put Ridder into the lineup. But it's complicated. It's tough to figure out. But I understand the frustration from fantasy football players and fans that are questioning the draft strategy involved in drafting Kyle Pitts and Drake London. When you is this the offense they really want to run? Are they really going to just be this, number one rushing attack in the NFL and barely ever throw the ball sort of offense? I don't think that's what they want, because it's very difficult to win in the playoffs with that sort of offense. You're going to eventually come up against an opponent, in the AFC, the two that you always point to, right, would be the Bills and the Chiefs, and they're going to score points on you. You're not going to be able to just ground and pound your way out of that, even with a very good defense, which Falcons don't have that either right now. They have a defense that's, I think, punching a little bit above their weight, certainly, and keeping everything in check. But the final form of this offense has the passing game as a much more dynamic and productive part of it. But I don't know when we're going to see that. And will we see it with Marcus Mariota? That's the question. Will we see it with Desmond Ridder? That's another question. But the more games they win, the more likely that it's Mariota or Ridder next year and not a rookie coming in here. So,
yeah. You saying playoffs reminds me, I probably need to get the Jim Moore sound drop.
Yeah. Playoffs.
For the pod over the next couple of weeks. That'll be fun. But yeah, I think, because I wrote about this for the Falcoholic, pretty good website. I know that at least one good writer that they have over there, and his contributions. But I wrote about this past week, where a win against the 49ers felt like it was going to potentially, put it, the Ridder switch, which has been oft discussed here on this podcast and elsewhere amongst the fan base over the last couple of months, on an indefinite leave of absence. And so that timeline is going to be interesting, because, as you say, if they keep winning and they have the soft part of their schedule upcoming, which is kind of what myself and others kind of envisioned all along, was, hey, this is the point in the season where it would make sense to insert Ridder, because you put him in a position to succeed. And probably at this point in time in the year, you're going in, to that week 8 game against Carolina, and then a couple of soft games after that, probably not in playoff contention. And now it looks like the Falcons, based off of how they played this year, may wind up potentially being legitimately in playoff contention. So fascinating to see how that goes. But I generally agree with you that I don't think this sort of shuts the door on the Falcons making a switch to Ridder down the road, because I still think the optimism and the hopes and the dreams of, getting a little bit more consistent passing ability from Desmond Ridder is still on the table compared to what you're getting with Marcus Mariota. But as you say, if Mariota continues to play like he has the last couple of games, I think the way I termed it in that article at Falcaholic was, if it's not broke, don't fix it, sort of thing. So we'll see how that goes for this football team. But obviously this is a good problem to have, where we're not sitting here midway through the season being like, oh God, we got to get a quarterback, and it's like, well, I mean, we may still be having that conversation later in the season, but it does feel like the way that they want to play football, going back to what you were saying earlier, is not one where they're in a position where they need a quarterback that can go out there and throw the ball 40, 50 times a game and win games for them. The way that they want to play football is, running the football, hoping to build that defense. And, between Mariota, between Desmond Ridder, they should have a guy that's good enough to keep them competitive week in and week out and in potential playoff contention, as they may or may not be. Again, this is where that Jim Moore sound drop would be perfect right now.
Yeah.
But we'll see what they do. So I think this is a good problem to have, that we're not sitting here going like, oh no, we're 3-3, we're going to be out of the quarterback race going into the draft. And it's like, yeah, like we may be out of the quarterback race, but who cares? Because we're kind of good to go. So
Yeah. It's tough to predict these things. I mean, like last week after that game, everyone was like, oh, when are we going to see Ridder? What the hell's going on? And then a week later, Mariota has a good game, and then it quiets down. But like none of this like is really probably moving the needle for the team too much. I think it's more about Ridder than it is about Mariota, to be honest. Like if the team feels like he's the better option for winning games at any point, I think he's going to play. But until that time, I don't think he's going to be forced onto the field. I mean, this is a 3rd round pick. This isn't a top 10 pick that came in here that's just waiting in the wings like a Kenny Pickett to just get on the field. But again, you see Pickett, you see Bailey Zappi with the Patriots. Like, these guys are coming in and having success. So there's really not a reason to be like, oh, well, Ridder's considered to be the most pro ready of all of them. So like, if they thought that they needed Ridder, or, that he was a better option, I think you have all the proof you need to insert him. But this year, it's a weird year for this team because, clearly no one expected him to do much of anything. USA Today expected him to win 2 games. They've already beaten that projection, so good on them. I think there's a very legitimate chance they come out of this next 7-game stretch with not only a winning record, they could be 2-3 games above 500 because I think they'll be favored in 5 of the next 7 games. Now that doesn't mean they win 5 of the next 7 games, but they could. Have they even been favored yet at all this season? I think they were 1-point underdogs to the Seahawks. I think that was the closest we got.
Yeah, I think that wound up moving to being a pick'em by the end of Sunday. But yeah, it was pretty close.
Right. So this team is no stranger to being underdogs in every game. It'll be interesting for them to be favored. But you look at the upcoming opponents, and they've played like a lot of actually quality run defenses so far, and it hasn't mattered. Like, no one's been able to stop the run game. Obviously the 49ers are not at full strength, but they haven't had Armstead and Kinlaw for weeks. So it's not like those two were just only out for this game and they were the number 1 rush defense with those guys. And now, without them, they were bad. Like, I mean, Nick Bosa is obviously a huge loss. Can't really put a number value on that, but the Falcons have run the ball against everyone, and now they're going to get to a chunk of their schedule where they're going to face some soft run defenses. The Bengals, I believe, are like 20-something in run defense. They are 23rd in yards per carry allowed and 21st in yardage. So that's one of the easier run defenses they've played. The Panthers are very bad. They are, I believe, 26th in yardage allowed. They've allowed 7 rushing touchdowns, also the Panthers. So that's 24th in the league. The Chargers, notably, are the worst run defense in the NFL. They allow 5.8 yards per carry and are 23rd in run yardage allowed, despite facing the 4th fewest carries of any team. So, and then they get to play the Panthers again. So, like, they're going to be able to play their game against this next set of teams. And I think it's going to work really well against teams that like the 49ers were a perfect example. The Browns were a perfect example. These are teams that want to play the exact same game the Falcons are playing if they can, just ground and pound and win and try to shut them down with your defense and that sort of thing. But the Falcons just out Browns and out 49ers, both of those teams. Like they did what they wanted to do, but better. And I do wonder what happens when they go up against some of these more, high flying offenses. So far, it hasn't gone well for them. The Saints aired it out late in that game, had a lot of success, ended up pulling off that huge win. The Rams had a lot of success through the air against the Falcons. The Bucks, they didn't throw it deep necessarily, but all those dump offs just carved up the Falcons defense. And, we can certainly argue about whether the ending of that game should have been different. But, when they've gone up against teams like themselves, the Falcons have shown that they can beat anyone they can beat pretty much anyone at their game. But if they have to get into a shootout with somebody, so far it hasn't resulted in wins, although, to be fair, it has been close. I mean, maybe the Seahawks game is the closest example of that where they won. But they're going to have to find a way to do that now going up against over these next games. The Bengals, that offense has come back to life. The Panthers, okay, that one, probably, they better win both those games is what I'm saying. The Chargers, challenging. Bears, I'd like the Panthers and the Bears, and even the Commanders and the Steelers to some extent. Those are all probably teams that you could say these are like the teams that are going to want to do the same thing as the Falcons. And the Falcons have shown they can beat anyone at that game. But, that's why I would be most questionable. Like the two games I would circle is they're probably not going to be favored. Bengals, they're already not favored. They're 5.5 point underdogs. And then the Chargers, I don't expect them to be favored either. But the rest of those teams, they should win those games. And if they win those, 5 games and go 5-2, they will be at 8-6. I think that is going into, or 8-7.
8-5.
No, 8-6. 8-5. Okay, sorry. Math not my strong suit. It's for I have the spreadsheet do it for me usually. So, and then honestly, if they just go into the bye week with a winning record, I think they have a good chance to finish with a winning record because it's very possible they go 2-2. But I think if you need to win more than 2 games of that final 4-game stretch, you're probably not finishing with a winning record. So it really just depends. Can they keep playing their game and can they upgrade the passing game to go toe to toe with some of these potentially more high flying offenses that they're going to end up seeing, in the Bengals, the Chargers, and then late in the season, they're going to play the Saints again. They're going to play the Ravens, the Cardinals, and the Bucks again. They're going to be tested there. And we're going to find out, can they adapt this passing game with Marcus Mariota to do that? Or is it going to be Desmond Ridder at some point coming in and sort of unlocking that part of the offense? But right now, I mean, Arthur Smith, do what you want. Clearly I personally think it's a miracle that this team is a top 3 rushing offense and a top 10 scoring offense when you lose your franchise quarterback and you basically make only minor changes to the offensive line that was 31st in rushing last year and one of the worst pass blocking units we've ever seen. So, I mean, it's almost miraculous that they didn't really meaningfully change personnel. I mean, obviously going from Ryan to Mariota, but most people thought that would be a huge downgrade. So, I mean, I will accept Arthur Smith's decision-making on when or if Ridder plays, as long as they keep winning. So
there you go. He has earned the benefit of the doubt. And so we'll wrap up today's episode here with Kevin Knight, because basically I told Kevin I wanted to talk about Mariota and Ridder because that's the only thing I care about, at least based off of the people in the comments. That's what their perception of this podcast is.
We got to talk about Felipe Franks and MyCole Pruitt, right? We got to talk about the tight end competition back there. So
yeah, so basically as we wrap up today's episode, I'll just give Kevin the floor and he can just spew takes. Capital TAEKS takes here on Locked On Falcons. So we'll get into that as we wrap up today's episode. And guys, I want to tell you about Prize Picks, a fun new way to play daily fantasy. All you got to do is pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 10 times the money on your entry, such as if you now feel like Kyle Pitts has scored a touchdown, you want to go more or less, not only on his yardage, but now potential touchdowns, as well as fantasy stats. You can do that at Prize Picks. And it's not just NFL. You can do it for the NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, so much more. Prize Picks is safe, it's fast, it's easy. It's currently in operation in over 30 states in the US and Canada. All you have to do is download the Prize Picks app or visit prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy in this fun new way. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That means if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to use that promo code Locked On, LOCKEDON, at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Guys, here with Kevin Knight of the Falcoholic, wrapping up today's Locked On Falcons. And Locked On Falcons, just like so many other local Atlanta podcasts, is available on Roku and Amazon Fire TV as part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. You get the same great local sports coverage 24/7 and for free. Just download the Locked On Sports Atlanta app today on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. So, Kevin, as I said earlier, I'm done. I just wanted to pick your brain on Mariota versus Ridder. But any other thoughts you had on yesterday's game against the 49ers or the Falcons in general?
Yeah, hold on. Let me unroll my scroll. I have some things to get off my. Yeah. No, it's been interesting. We've seen the Falcons do this with a couple of players where they sort of slowly elevate them from the practice squad to the active roster. Like I think the first one we saw was Abdullah Anderson, and he eventually supplanted Anthony Rush on the active roster. We saw Caleb Huntley get, flexed and then play really well. And then now he's on the active roster, although he didn't have to supplant anyone. That was more of like injury related. I think the same thing's happening now with MyCole Pruitt, who now has had 2 very quality games, mostly as a blocker, though he did catch that touchdown, which certainly helps. But he's coming to the roster this week, I imagine. But I don't think it's your boy Felipe Franks that's going to get the cut. It's going to be Anthony Firkser, I would wager. Because, Firkser just doesn't block. There's clearly not enough passing volume to go around to keep another, just Pat. We've got Felipe Franks at home. We don't need another Felipe Franks, in Anthony Firkser. And MyCole Pruitt is clearly capable of catching a couple passes if you need him to. Honestly, that's what he was in college, was a receiving tight end. And he's that rare guy that becomes a blocker when he's been a receiver his entire career. And he's been an excellent blocker, according to PFF. I think he had an 80 grade this week and a 70 something grade last week. So clearly the blocking is more important than anything else for this Falcons team right now, because they just ran the ball 40 times in a game and passed 14 times. So I think that's probably what we're going to see. But I don't think it's Felipe Franks getting the axe as some have said. So Franks was active. Firkser was not. Yeah.
It'll be a sad day on this podcast if Felipe Franks gets the axe, but continue.
I don't think it's happening. Yeah. I don't think that's happening. Because it's just with Franks, it seems like with Franks, when the lights come on, he's just not quite ready. But in training camp, he was catching everything. He looked awesome. I don't blame Arthur Smith for being we've got something in this dude. I'm going to be patient and wait and see, because in camp, he was one of the most frequently targeted players. He had all kinds of great plays. So I think it's okay to be patient. I know a lot of people are oh, Franks, he's not catching anything. He's not blocking. Why is he on the roster? And I would say literally relax, because those 5 last spots on the roster really don't matter. This is not the Kansas City Chiefs that need to maximize every single player because we're making a deep playoff run. Maybe we can talk about being frisky in the wild card round, guys, but let's calm down about that. We need to maximize all 53 spots every week to make sure we are ready deep into February. So if you want to keep a pet project player around Arthur Smith, go for it. It really doesn't matter, those last couple guys. If you have some amazing player that you're trying to bring onto the Falcons with that last spot, please send a message to the Falcons and let them know about this unheralded hero that's just sitting out there in free agency. I don't believe that player exists, but whatever. Avery Williams, right? Awesome. He's going to break a return touchdown here very soon. He's been very close. So I'm
I know
excited
Cordero
about.
Patterson's pissed off at that.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, this dude's heating up. He's going to steal my kickoff return touch. We just need Avery Williams to get his, and then Cordero will come back in and he can get his going. But I mean, we've seen the big, I guess, question this week is how many cornerbacks are we going to be missing? It sounds like Casey Hayward we're going to be missing for a while. I don't know what that means other than that, but I wouldn't expect him to play anytime soon. It sounds like the other thing is true with AJ Terrell, where it was basically precautionary and they were just not interested in putting him back in there with a 14-point lead. And I think that makes total sense. Isaiah Oliver, we haven't really heard anything. I don't know if that's good or bad with this coaching staff. It could be either one. So at that point, I think if we can have Oliver and Terrell back for this next game, I think the secondary will be fine. But I think if you're now trying to trot out, several new players and that could be an issue. But I do wonder who you think will be the outside corner. Do you think it's going to remain Darren Hall at the outside spot?
That would be my
D.
guess.
Alford played it in the CFL, I guess, but he's played mostly slot for the Falcons. So
Yeah. I would imagine it'll probably be Hall up since he's kind of been the guy all year long because we've seen Terrell and Hayward out in and out of the lineup, these games, and Hall's kind of stepped in and done a pretty solid job. Obviously it's going to be, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. It's going to be a challenge, right? But like he's, outside of that Cooper Kupp game, and then he wound up making the play of the game in that game. So even when he got beat on that, so like I've liked what Darren Hall's put together. So I would assume he hasn't done anything to force a team to make a change there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I would say, like Hall's coverage has been very hit or miss, but then he's just like ferocious as a tackler, and like he's just been batting balls down, and like he's got the ball skills. I would not say that his coverage is the tightest that I've ever seen, but when you can make up for that with good play against the run, with causing fumbles and breaking up passes, then you can tolerate a little bit of some coverage lapses now and again, as long as you make some plays to make it up. And I think I think that's perfectly fine from your like fourth cornerback, that you're like, oh yeah, he's not going to be the best pure coverage player, but he's going to go out there and potentially create some turnovers. So that's pretty much all you can ask for from your fourth corner. And I think the Falcons will be okay without Casey Hayward. It sounds like it'll be a long-term injury. I think that does certainly hurt the defense in a big way, but they weren't all that good against the pass to begin with. So maybe this makes them like disastrous now. I don't know, but all we ever really needed was for the defense to make a few stops here and there, and then the Falcons offense will just kind of suffocate the life out of the opponent. So hopefully they can continue playing that strategy, even if Hayward has to miss a decent chunk of time.
Yeah, I think for this upcoming Bengals game, it's really all about the front, right? Like everybody who's had success shutting down this Bengals team is because Joe Burrow was basically under siege the first couple of weeks of the season. It seems like they're getting that sort of fixed. So basically, I think the Falcons' key to success, at least this week, is basically not really what they do on the back end, because those guys are pretty good. The Bengals receivers, I would say, it's really about the guys up front. So as you say, I think Hall, you kind of mentioned it earlier, like their defensive formula is just basically like bend but don't break, create some turnovers, and no, we don't expect this defense to shut anybody down. It's just like, hey, just get a couple of key stops, and in these one-score ball games, that's the difference between winning and losing. So I think Hall can give you some of that based off of what he's done so far this year. And as you said, given that he's a backup, you're not expecting him to come out here and maybe he can be Rasul Douglas or something like that. But that's about the best case scenario.
Yeah. And, the Falcons, I think I said like they should be around 20th right now, 19th in scoring defense, the Falcons. So, and again, this defense doesn't strike fear into anyone. And, they're not exactly star-studded. I mean, Grady Jarrett's out there like just being the man every single week and just crushing people, but that's basically all they have on the interior in terms of like consistent pressure. And the pass rush, I think, is really the Achilles heel of this defense right now. They just don't have the bodies to do it. I think Ebiketie is starting to heat up a bit. Lorenzo Carter's always been more of like a jack of all trades edge defender as opposed to like a great pass rusher. And I think he's been totally fine in that role, but they're just really missing that dynamic rusher next to Jarrett, and they're really missing that true like top edge guy. And I think if they could get even one of those pieces, would probably turn this into like an average pass rush, but like they don't have either one. And they just don't get pressure without blitzing. And even when they blitz, they don't get pressure sometimes. So it's very limited with what they can do in terms of pressuring the quarterback, which is why we're seeing all this like zone and all this like crazy, like we're going to show like all out blitz and we're just going to drop like 5 guys back off the line just to confuse the hell out of you and all this. And, credit to DMPs, like it worked against Garoppolo late in that game. They were like, oh, we're getting crushed on these short crossers. We're just going to drop like 5 linebackers in coverage and just cloud up all that stuff. And maybe we can take it away. And they did. So it's not pretty most weeks. I will say, I think the run defense has been like really not bad. I think they're 9th in rushing yardage allowed, 15th in yards per carry, which is generally the more, proper measure to tell how good your run defense is. But so they're about an average run defense, I would say, maybe a little bit above average. And that, like I said, that helps them beat teams at their own game, which is what that's when they've had the most success so far. So it's interesting, but right now I think this team is on track for the rosier projections in the offseason preseason. Like I think I predicted them to get 6 wins, maybe 7, but I think you could probably say this 7 to 8 might be what you would be sort of pegging as the average finish for this team based on this early stretch, because I think even the most generous among us probably had this team at like 2-4 at this point. So, I mean, obviously there's some homers out there that probably had them at like 6-0, but that, I'm not talking about you guys. You guys continue living that king life, but yeah, I mean, like I think I expected them to be like 2-4 at best at this point. So getting that extra win is meaningful. Now you just can't blow it, also. So
we'll see. Well, Kevin, I appreciate you joining me and giving me these takes to wrap up the show. I don't get too many people that I can talk to about Felipe Franks on this podcast, and
deep
MyCole
practice
Pruitt.
squad,
third,
elevation
third, tight ends. Yeah, man,
Yep.
It's great. This is the stuff I live for. So yeah, really appreciate you joining me. Let the people know what you got going on over at the Falcaholic and on the podcast. Yeah,
guys, you can tune into my quality audio / video program, which is the Falcaholic podcast and the Falcaholic Live. We got live shows Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's the flagship program. And then we've got the post-game shows on Sunday. I believe Alan Stirk will be joining me for the post-game shows going forward now.
I've heard of him.
Yes, I believe you two have met maybe once or twice over the years, or 200 times. I forgot how many episodes you guys actually did together. It might be more like 200. I know there was a lot.
It's somewhere in the 200s.
Yeah. So we got that going, and then there's also a couple of recorded shows a week. I've got the film review that comes out usually Tuesday afternoons, and then the game preview, which comes out on Friday morning. So you guys can look forward to that good stuff. And then all of my written content, since I'm doing so much recording and production these days, I don't have as many like banger written articles coming out. I guess that's going to be more like off-season, like draft stuff. But I do have some mostly game picks type stuff, the real low-hanging fruit articles I'm taking over this year. But every once in a while I do put out a banger. Like I broke down the Deion Jones contract and his, sort of the reasons for trading him and the financial stuff. So you can look for that. That was last week, and probably have some sort of like mid-season review, here in a few weeks or whatever. But there's definitely some quality written content there from a lot of other people that aren't me as well. So check out thefalcaholic.com and follow me at Falcaholic Kevin as well.
Yeah, if you want some sweet content on the Falcaholic written content, you got to check out my Name 5 Falcons content that I write every week on Saturdays. It drops every Saturday for intriguing players. So, guys, go check that out. Go check out Kevin's work. Obviously, he does great stuff over at the Falcaholic. Occasionally, I show up there to talk about third string tight ends and whatnot. So go check that out as well. Kevin, really appreciate you joining me on today's episode.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure.
All right, guys, that's it for us here. Thanks, Kevin Knight, to joining me. one of the things I forgot to mention to Kevin is that when Kevin's on the show on these Tuesday recap episodes, I believe the Falcons are now 6-0 over the last 3 years. So we will probably wind up using Kevin as a good luck charm later in the season, particularly if the Falcons can kind of start stacking wins, start talking about playoffs. By the time we get to that bye week in week 13 and whatnot. So we might have to save Kevin for when the Falcons may need to get some of those wins late in the season to sort of solidify that. But we're not going to get too far ahead of ourselves. We're just going to focus on the all 22 on tomorrow's episode. And I'll probably talk a little bit about the rookies, Arnold Ebiketie, Troy Anderson on that episode. If you have any other topics that you want me to address and answer on tomorrow's episode, we can get into that by hitting me up on Twitter or Facebook at Locked On Falcons. You can send an email to lockedonfalcons@mail.com. You can leave a comment here on the Locked On Falcons YouTube channel, or you can drop it in the Discord, Locked On Falcons. There's a link in the description below. So guys, send in those questions. Get them in Monday night, get them in Tuesday morning. Greater chance that I will be able to answer them on tomorrow's episode. And then, of course, later in the week, we'll do the crossover with the Locked On Bengals guys to get a preview of that team and that matchup and see if the Falcons can once again shock the world, right? And beat this Bengals team. And all of a sudden, all that talk about
what's that? Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
All of that may wind up coming true. So, guys, really appreciate it.